Yep. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking time this afternoon to come for today's event. I'm Zing from SGInnovate, and today we are very happy to have global leaders in AI and quantum technologies. Since late 2018, SGInnovate has been holding events on quantum awareness and readiness, and we'll be having another one in August, so do keep an eye out of it. At SGInnovate, we believe Singapore has the capabilities and resources to tackle hard problems from around the world, and part of our efforts includes knowledge-sharing sessions like the one you're here for today. So without further ado, I'll hand over the mic to our moderator for the day, Paul, who will have his opening remarks. Paul, please.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Let's see if this thing works now. Ready? So everybody, thank you so much. We were talking about the book that David Lee and myself wrote and just recently published. I've just been around Hong Kong and 4 cities in China on a book tour with the CFA Institute. Everyone is looking and talking about this. We still don't have a presentation. Here we go. Great. Now, this book is about all of the new types of technologies that are having profound effects on the financial landscape, both in terms of finance and insurance, but also we delve into one area in particular, which is a very big part of the book, which is quantum computing. And there's a very long chapter written by one of my colleagues and a company that I invested in called QBranch in Washington, D.C., which just was acquired by Rigetti this week. And so we collaborated on a chapter in that as well. So today I want to give you a quick summary of the book, and then everyone will get up here. We'll talk a little bit about what's up with everybody. David is one of the global experts in blockchain. Yvonne is one of the experts in the world on quantum computing, and Yang is with Zongan, which is a fascinating company that I've been covering ever since its IPO in Hong Kong on insurtech, and probably one of the most advanced companies in the world on insurtech applications. So we'll have lots of interesting stuff. So I'm going to turn this on. There we go. There we go. Okay, so the first 2 chapters of the book is about behavior and how AI can all make us better. I was at Rise yesterday in Hong Kong, and there was a lot of talk about taking the man out of manufacturing, and we have a gentleman here doing robotics, and the emphasis has got to be that all of this is going to make us better, more productive, and allow us to all become, better workers. It's not the elimination of the worker, it's to make us better workers. And the focus that we have in the first 2 chapters of the book is on all of the foibles, the human blind spots that cause us to make mistakes over and over and over again, especially as a group. And so we talk about a lot of this. AI, as I say here on the top, these are the kinds of things that are the 4 basic problems. Fear of authority, hyper-rationality, lack of imagination, and groupthink cause all of the 21 or 22 blind spots that are now being talked about more and more in the psychology of economics. And a lot of this is changing very rapidly, and we go through every one of those, and we look at applications now of AI to overcome this. On the bottom, we have AI tools and self-learning. I've taught a lot of courses in this. David teaches courses in this all the time. One of David's great points is on the bottom, the AI tools, every one of those David learned 30 years ago at the London School of Economics. These are not new. The machine learning tools are new, but almost all of this is all old tools that are 2 or 3 decades old. So when I think of AI using mostly a lot of traditional tools, but it's involving hundreds of millions of data points. That's the only thing. And we're going to have to get used to dealing with very large amounts of data points. Because we're trying to figure out the problem. Groupthink is what causes so many catastrophic problems in investments, in equity markets, private equity, and all kinds of activity in corporate investment. When groupthink is dominant, we have a fear of judgment and we quit. The second one is authority. I think this is true in all cultures. It's not, necessarily relegated to the, Asian culture, which is presumed to be more patrilineal. I think it's true in every culture. We have a fear of failure, a fear of public failure, and so we hide. The third one is imagination. When we had the 9/11 Commission about what caused, the most advanced intelligence agencies in the world to fail to see, what was being done by, 16, young adults. The number one reason was lack of imagination. So much of what happens to us in investments, in financial activity, is an absence of imagination. And AI deals with this. And then the last one is hyper-rationality, fear of the irrational. We freeze. And so all of these tools are geared toward eliminating, as much as we can, all of these blind spots that are part of the human condition. And fundamentally, I would boil it down to one thing. We are genetically designed to fit in. We are genetically designed as a species to go along with the group. The group is better than the individual. That's how we're geared. And that's just not true. That's just not true. Sometimes that's a bad thing. And so these tools are geared to overcome some of these shortcomings. Why? We depend on the group. We tire easily. We want to be liked. We frighten easily, and we love pleasure. And artificial intelligence activities are geared to be precisely the opposite of that. And that's what the first 2 chapters of the book is about. The next part of the book is all about this, I call it a land grab. There's a global land grab for financial services. And we're going to talk about, I'm going to put David on the spot, and we're going to talk about Facebook Libra. Because I believe Facebook Libra is a counter to Alipay and Ant. And so far, I think the most successful company in the world, bar none, is Alibaba and Ant. In the way that it is turning retail, rideshare, and payments into financial services, into banking. So all of these three things are morphing into banking, and it's changing the nature of how all of us, as our careers evolve, have to move into data-dependent activities that were traditionally very restricted to merchandising, supply chain, working capital, corporate finance, engineering, right? Rideshare is a physical activity. It's delivering packages, it's delivering food, and it's delivering people. It's a 3-dimensional activity which is turning into banking. And I want to talk about Grab in a minute, because I think Grab is in the middle of a lot of this as a very interesting company. I think it's one of the most interesting companies right now. So we'll talk about that. This is an example of payments going into banking. This is an example of retail turning into banking. I want to give you the example of Tokopedia and Lazada in a minute. But certainly Walmart is trying to go as quickly as it can. And here's your imperial land grab people, right? You have SoftBank, Tiger, Alibaba, Tencent, I think Temasek, I think GIC, I think CIC, and now I think Facebook and Amazon. I think Amazon, Microsoft, and Apple are going to have tokens by the middle of next year. They will all have closed token systems. And I was talking with one of our friends at Grab yesterday at Rise, and I make the analogy of planets being born, right? And planets are born out of gigantic explosions. But as planets evolve, they have their own center of gravity. And so, in talking to Grab, I was saying, does Grab want to be a moon or does Grab want to be a planet? And so some of these guys want to be moons of Facebook, right? Stripe has decided to be a moon. MasterCard is going to be a moon, right? And they have 29 other moons now. The bigger the planet, the more the moons, right? We only have one moon, and the Earth. We're a tiny planet in our solar system. And so we're going to have to see what happens here in terms of what Amazon has planned in India to break out into the rest of the Far East and challenge Alibaba. What is Grab going to do? What is Gojek going to do? Right? So these are going to be interesting because every one of these companies is going to evolve into a financial services company, and also in insurance as well. And then lastly, banking, rideshare into banking. And so we have Didi, Ola, Grab, and Gojek all vying for a position as either planets or moons. And we have to see. I think Grab will become a planet. That's my prediction. I think Gojek will be a moon. It'll be an Indonesian moon. I think that Didi will be a Chinese moon, and it will not expand out. We'll talk more about this later on. And here is just an example of what Alibaba is doing. Alibaba is the Jupiter of finance right now. Alibaba is the largest planet in the system right now. And it's kind of been a runaway success. And I think, I can't prove this, but I think I can ask you later on and put you on the spot. I used to work with the US government in the White House many years ago, and so I think without evidence that there is a lot of US government support for Facebook Libra as a global challenge to Alibaba. I think I'm right. Very hard to prove, but I think I'm right. And so this is interesting things because a lot of this turns into politics as well. A lot of this is very political. But you can see here in Bangladesh, Philippines, Thailand, Singapore, Indonesia, and India, Alibaba has a tremendous advantage right now over any other company in the world. Alibaba's just been shut out of the US. Alibaba is basically closing its business in the US, and its business is shrinking. So it's basically opted out of the US. And they're like, I was talking to the head of the US in San Francisco recently, and he said, you know what? We can't be here. It's too old. We can't plug all the new stuff into Alibaba into a 50-year-old credit card system. So I guess we're going to leave anyways. It was a really interesting observation, right? And so this is what you see here for Alibaba. This is what Alibaba is doing. I think of it as the Borg in Star Trek. They just come in and they stick the thing into the back of the head, and then the thing evolves into the Alibaba network that they took 18 years to perfect in China. And so Paytm it looks like and feels like, and is, by the way, 5.0, Alibaba is Paytm now, right? Alibaba 5.0 is now been completely transmorphed into Paytm, and very similar to Tokopedia. These are now full-service financial services companies in basically 18 months, and all under Ali Cloud. And then here is what, in basically 2 years, Amazon has done. Amazon has replaced Standard Chartered's array of services in India in 24 months. Almost every one of those is either a new company or an acquisition started basically in 2017. And so Amazon is now giving these guys a run for their money. And I've had so many meetings in the last couple of years, and David and I talk about this all the time. Why aren't the banks acting, right? The banks are just deer in the headlights. The banks are paralyzed in terms of how to respond to this. And I think also the banks are completely paralyzed about how to respond to Facebook Libra as well. I think they just don't know how to respond. And so no wonder why the banks are trading at 0.4 times book, 0.5 times book, and the tech companies are trading at 7 times book. So the tech companies have valuations 10 times larger than the banks right now. Here is our friend Libra, and we'll talk about that. And last night we did an event, and it was a lot of fireworks, and a lot of fireworks were thrown last night, and some rotten tomatoes, and people have very strong opinions about this. So we're going to get ready for this. So get ready. So now, what's missing? Look at this and tell me what's missing. What is missing out? It's so obvious it will blind you. Who's missing out of this? Banks. Now, David Marcus last Thursday said it is not true that banks have rejected this consortium. It is not true. We are talking to banks, and we continue to talk to banks. I don't know if that's true or not. That's what he said. This is 29. They want to have 100 moons orbiting Facebook Libra by the end of the year, when they plan to launch this thing in January for 2.3 billion people. I did a panel a couple of weeks ago in Hong Kong with a lady who is the advisor to the Philippine Senate, and she was like, you know what? There's 90 million people in the Philippines, and there's 110 million Facebook accounts. And all of these Filipinos who are shipping money back to the Philippines are paying 12% on Western Union. And that to us is totally unacceptable. And if you can get something that's basically free, we'll take it. And I have to tell you also, the Bank of Thailand was very similar, very positive. I think Libra will take off in emerging markets and frontier, and we'll have a much harder time in developed markets. That's my prediction. And then here's the problem, right? All of the banks have had all your information for decades. They know all about you. They know all about your utility bills, your mortgage, everything about you. They have done nothing with it for 30 years. And so when it comes to all these things, advertising, food delivery, tickets, lifestyle, streaming, both music and video, utilities, coupons, wallet, voice shopping, and groceries, the banks are doing virtually nothing. And they've been bypassed. That's your new financial services company. And this is what these guys are doing really, really well. And that's a big problem. And then in blockchain, which I'm going to leave the heavy lifting to David here, all I can say to you is the one country in the world that hates Bitcoin more than anybody else is China. The one country that is probably going to have a PBOC coin, a central bank coin, faster than anybody else, China. Right? For them, they're diametrically opposite things. They have nothing to do with each other. So this is very important to remember. And then we have an example of a fascinating company in China doing work with the PBOC in blockchain, which is basically it utterly alters the whole role of corporate finance, working capital, logistics. This becomes an integrated system with blockchain where you can begin to distribute short-term credit for working capital by way of a logistical network. And this is what's happening in China right now. They're already very advanced on this, right? And when I was explaining this to a delegation from the Minneapolis Federal Reserve a couple of months ago, they were like, you know what, you need to stop. Because you know what we're doing in the Minneapolis Federal Reserve? We're still getting people to stop using paper checks. So we're not quite there yet on the blockchain thing. That's a true statement. And all of us were like, okay, let's just close this book and let's move on. Okay, and then on the cloud stuff, there's a lot of stuff in there. I don't want to cover that, but what I can say is that Ollie Cloud is as much of a competitor to AWS outside in Asia and is foundational to the One Belt, One Road. So a lot of this is going to become very political as we go forward. Lastly, we're going to turn it over to our Madam Quantum here. But why did we put a chapter in this? I'm going to be very brief. In April of 2017, the US strategic freakout, the US strategic panic attack started. That was when the US began to say, what is going on here with China? That was the month that China launched a satellite into space, which had a quantum communication satellite. So not only did the US not know about this, they did not know that there was a quantum satellite that could operate in space. And at the time, the US could only do line-of-sight quantum communications technology. And this is when everyone's like, wait a minute here, we give you like $600 billion at the Pentagon, and you didn't know about this, A, and B, you can't do it? And so this is from my source in our quantum computing company in DC. That is when the Sputnik atomic bomb moment started for America. It's like, wait a minute, we need to slow these guys down so we can catch up in quantum technology, in 5G, and other things. That's what's going on here. Okay? And then, and as a result, I believe the world's going to be splitting in two. I believe we're going to have a Huawei world, which is a very political structure, with the Ministry of State Security and the State Council and so forth, and Alibaba and Tencent. And we're going to have an AT&T, Verizon, Qualcomm, Apple, which is also a very political structure. You know, I worked in the White House. These are very political companies. One of the people I know has a relative at Intel who's writing a memoir. One of these guys at Intel was like, I think he was, you know, Intel number 5. And in his memoir, which is going to be coming out, he's going to say that 3 of the top people at Intel in the 1970s worked for the CIA. This should not surprise any of us, because this company, InQtel, right there below the DoD, CIA, and the NSA, is the hedge fund for the CIA. They funded Google. They funded Palantir. They're funding currently about 170 companies in Silicon Valley. And so there's a lot of tremendous political activity here. I'm doing a course with David at SUSS about this in a couple of weeks, so look at that for the SUSS. So this is what we got here, and as a result, we have a lot of really great food for thought. So with no introduction, I'm going to be very brief. Mr. Blockchain, David Lee, Madam Quantum, Yvonne, and Mr. InsurTech, Yang. All of these guys were way in the front of our skis here, because all of these guys are in brand new technologies that are basically being created today. So come on up and we'll have a little discussion, and then we're going to open it up for Q&A. Okay, so you guys come on up and sit wherever you like, and the person who sits closest to me is going to go first. Okay, David, so first of all, you go. So I want you to either support or badmouth Facebook Libra. Go ahead, you can start.
I'm over.
Yeah, I think you're on. I think you're good. Is it? Oh yeah, just push your mic and then, yeah.
I'm neutral, so.
You're very Singapore. Okay, yeah.
First of all, I really enjoy working together with you. I think the book is, I learned a lot from you, and there's a lot of thoughts that came out from there, and I think Libra coin has actually embodied the 5 Ds. They have digitalization, which they have done. They are trying to disintermediate. And they have democratized services. Yep. And these 3 are very important for fintech companies like WeChat and Financial.
To compete against it.
Yeah, the first 3 Ds, I think all the fintech companies, the bank aside, they have actually done it. But the last 2 Ds, what impresses me with Facebook, because the 4th D is decentralization. Yep. So they try to decentralize, and the last D is even more important. Nobody has actually thought about that. The last D is what Satoshi is very good. He diminishing himself, or the whole group diminishing themselves into the background. And you can see from the white paper, that's what they are trying to do. So there's a 5 Ds element in there in Libra that actually is the core thinking of decentralization. May not be what the cypherpunks are thinking about, may not be what the blockchain community is thinking about, but they are trying hard to have 28 nodes and then continue to 100. To 100, and they are moving from permission. It will be a challenge, but they are trying to be permissionless. So
in 5 years, do you buy that?
There will be a lot of challenges, but 5 years, they are, I would say that, to be fair to Facebook, they are very good at timing. They gave themselves close to half a year to 1 year to negotiate with everybody, right? Technology is there. They have the white paper, technical white paper. They have the test net out. Everything is ready, but they know that it's about regulation. So they give themselves 6 months to 1 year. They give themselves 5 years from permission to, open blockchain. So they are in the process of decentralization, because decentralization is a dynamic process of distributing trust. Yep. And also the second part, which I think is really missing, and people are just worried about, is actually privacy protection. Yep. So there's only, I think, one word among the entire lot of white papers that mention privacy protection. So that is where I think people are just worried about whether the whole exercise is for growth hacking. Yep. If that's the case, then maybe it's a way to negotiate, right? Then privacy protection becomes a negotiation tools, and maybe that the basket of stable fiat assets are negotiation tools. The other 72 nodes are negotiation tools. So I think it is the ultimate the game theory.
Yeah. So on the one hand, last night in Hong Kong, there was a lot of people who are the, that you call I'm just half joking, that the cyberpunk, Leninists, who, we want a public blockchain, no way, we're going to have a closed, people were very vociferous and aggressive. I mean, the internet is a public, open thing. How can anybody think that this can work, without having a public thing like that's identical to the internet? And yet I think that it just it's a fact of life, I think, that the example I would use is gas stations. When we developed the car in America in like 1895 to 1910, well, that's great. You have the car, that's sort of your internet. But somebody had to come along and create like 50,000 gas stations. And if you have 50,000 groups developing 50,000 gas stations, no one's going to know what side the gas tank is on. No one's going to know how big the nozzle is. No one's going to know what octane levels are. There is only a way to do this, which is a cartel. And so you had the seven sisters. You had the seven oil companies who created the global gas station, right? They rolled it out. You couldn't have had 10,000 gas companies rolling out gas stations across the world. That would never have worked. And so do you buy that there needs to be a degree of closed cartelization? Because as the lady who was the advisor to the Philippine Senate said, hey, you know what? If we can have, 50 million people who don't have bank accounts getting bank accounts, all the better.
Yeah, I think that my response to that is that when the first block of Bitcoin was mined, there was just only one person, right? And then the second block, which is about 10 days later, there were just two of them. So anything that's decentralization is a dynamic process. It takes time. So from one node to two nodes, and then you have thousands of nodes which are doing that. So I think what Facebook is doing is that, yes, it is the first one, and we always have this worry that winner takes all, right? But like you say, why not WeChat coin? Why not a Huawei coin? Why not? And then why not the Google coin? Why not AMS coin? So it is the first time that we hear of Facebook coin. It takes off. I'm sure that within the next 2-3 months, all the coins will come out. And then you have many
new
blockchains. And the real thing is that it is a change of trust. It's a distribution of trust, because we were looking at government as the only source of trust. Right? This is the only source of trust that we have. And then we say that stabilize a stable coin. You stabilize the coin with what reference, what metric? And we say to fiat currency. But stabilization could be to earnings. Stabilization could be to your own cash flow. Stabilization could be to your staking crypto income. There's this proof of stake, right? Your stake are deriving returns for you in cryptocurrency. So at some stage where there's enough trust in corporates, then it will become a case where I can use my own earnings as a stability. So it's stable with reference to my earnings. So it is a change in society that maybe now the government needs to look at it, that do I need to create money? I used to have the banks to create money. But if the banks are not doing a good job in credit rating, do I need the banks to create the other $9 after I give them $1? Why don't I have 100% like Facebook that backed by fiat currency? And then I have many Libra 1, 2, 3, AWS 1, 2, 3, Huawei 1, 2, 3, and the entire landscape will really change, because then the government are just saying that I'm returning the power to the people. And that's real democracy.
I don't think central banks are very nice, and so I'm skeptical about how central banks are going to respond to this. It's going to be very interesting. And please get your questions ready on Slido, so I'm ready to grill the group here. Now we're going to go to the opposite of something where there are probably only like, if you can tell us the number, of like 10 quantum computing machines in the world. So we're going to go like to secret, government-owned, this is the ultimate atomic bomb. I'm going to call it the atomic bomb race. So tell us what's going on with like what you're seeing in Asia. Because Yvonne and I had a long lunch the other day, and I could just sit and listen to you all day long, Yvonne. So tell us what you see in Asia on the quantum computing scene.
Sure, and I think you're doing a really good job in making it sound really, really exciting. It is a very dynamic moment in the field, but I think it's not to the level of secrecy of atomic bombs yet. There are national security implications, but I think right now the field is very much led by scientists. So by nature, we love to collaborate with each other. So you can generally break it down into big academic groups that are pursuing really the frontiers of quantum computing and quantum communication and building the latest technologies, maybe in a laboratory setting, so maybe not so scalable, but it will be the first demonstration of something being possible for the first time. And then the next group will be the new startups. Actually, quite a lot of them are around in Singapore. We have at least 2 software startups focusing on developing algorithms and software tools to allow everybody else, other scientists with no quantum computer backgrounds, to program quantum computers so that you can actually use the power that's unleashed by this new system. There are also hardware startups in Singapore and all over the world in quantum computing, both in terms of building tools and quantum devices that would go into part of the big quantum processor, as well as in actually developing the necessary components that would support this industry. For example, there's a company in Israel that develops completely classical components, but they will help people who build quantum computers to communicate with quantum computers more efficiently. So there is also a wide range of peripheral technologies that are emerging, and they're very often developed in small startups that are very dynamic, mostly led by scientists who've been through the research field and who are very qualified technically in this area. And then the last group I would say would be the big players like Google, IBM, and also Alibaba, which started their own
sort of
dedicated
a crash program.
quantum lab.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think they named it DAMO. It's Alibaba Quantum Lab as well.
In Hangzhou?
In Hangzhou, they're building their own campus, building their hardware, specifically focusing on hardware. And this is where maybe a little bit of what you mentioned would come in, of the national security, the quantum independence aspect, right? There are a lot of companies, big players that go into this industry, such as Huawei and Baidu. They very strategically focus on developing software tools and simulators rather than building the actual hardware. But for Alibaba, they've decided to actually start from the very basic and build their own hardware team and their own hardware platforms. So there are a variety of different approaches to this technology, and I think the diversity certainly helps to push this field forward much quicker than we were seeing maybe 5 years ago.
Okay, who has a machine now? So IBM, Google, the NSA, maybe the DIA. Does Huawei have one, do you think?
So I think we need to define the machine a little bit.
Yeah.
They are currently publicly available quantum processors, so they're prototypes. They're not really powerful enough to solve any quantum computing or any classical problems efficiently or more efficiently than we can do on a classical cluster, right? So those services are currently provided by Rigetti, which is one of the earliest startups in California in quantum computing, IBM Q, as well as, I think, Google, about to roll it out. But there are other companies with also similar capabilities, but not yet available to the public. So, for example, there's a startup in Maryland that has a different kind of system to what IBM and Google have, and they do have the hardware, but it's just not yet a publicly available platform for everybody to play with and try their quantum algorithms on.
And as far as you know, in Asia, Singapore and China, does Korea, Japan, India have things going on?
Well, yes, definitely there are research efforts. on quantum hardware all over Asia. I don't think we currently have a hardware provider that's based in Singapore that allows people to actually use their hardware and maybe start learning how to interact with the quantum systems. I think Alibaba would be soon having a system available for people to use. But I think that's the actual hardware, but there is also another category of companies that are providing quantum simulators. So these are really, really powerful classical systems that pretend to be quantum. So you can basically train your employees or develop your capabilities in software on these systems as if you're interacting with a quantum machine. Right, so for example, Atos in France, they have their own simulators. Huawei is also rolling out their own simulator. So there are quite a few providers in this area as well.
Okay, we got a question here. Give us a make your head explode example of how much faster quantum can be in meteorology. In our capability to cover more than 7 systems globally right now, 7 storm systems, is really poor. What does quantum computing do to cover storm systems?
So unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to give you an answer, but I think this is a really good question to lead on to this thing I want to cover about one of the biggest misconceptions about quantum computing, that it is just a faster computer. It's not. It runs on a very different platform, and it's not necessarily faster. It could be faster in certain cases where it's more intuitive to actually use a quantum system, and it wouldn't be faster in certain other cases. For example, even if I gave all of us a quantum computer right now, the PowerPoint or word processors are not going to be any faster. But maybe simulating a lot of molecules interacting together to maybe develop a new drug molecule, a new drug or a new chemical, a new material, that would be exponentially faster.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's very specific to the kind of problem that you want to solve, and it's very dependent on exactly what kind of algorithm you use to interact with the quantum machine.
So potentially, for instance, there's a lot of examples in the book that we use, and I think some of the most interesting is nitrogen cracking for the creation of fertilizers is like 5% of the world's energy supply. Quantum computing may change that. Meteorology, the capacity to cover multiple storm systems. Degenerative brain disease is another huge one where you're looking at protein folding that causes these brain diseases to occur, is looking at the interaction of hundreds of millions of enzymes and acids together. That's what quantum computing is good at.
Right.
Exactly. Okay, we got a ton of questions coming up. So Yang, you're also right in the front of your skis, doing some fascinating stuff with integrating, and again, you have a weird shareholding where Alibaba, Tencent, and Ping An are all the main shareholders of Zhong'an, and you are doing some stuff that's integrating the clinic, the doctor, the bank, the insurance company, and the pharmacy all together in one digital delivery system, which has never been tried before. And every time these things come along, we always think like, why is this taking so long? Why has it taken 50 years for somebody to, fricking figure this out? But now we have this being done. And so tell us what you're doing in terms of rolling out some of this new stuff in Southeast Asia.
Okay, thank you very much. So honestly, when I first received the invitation from Paul, I would prefer to say off the stage, and so that I could listen to the most advanced technologies and think about what are those technologies that I can implement in our real cases. So we are a startup, 5.5 years old. It is true that we have a very weird shareholding structure like Alibaba, Tencent, and Ping An and SoftBank right now. So the entity I'm working for is actually a joint venture between Zhong'an Insurance, which is the first online-only insurance in China, and SoftBank. We are dedicated in insurtech field because Zhong'an Insurance, as the first online-only insurance companies, the data we're dealing with is exponentially different from all the traditional insurance companies. If you consider the biggest insurance group, actually it's not an insurance group, it's a financial group in China, which is Ping An Group. They serve more than, I think, 100 million customers. But if you look at WeChat or Alibaba, they serve more than 800 million customers. And actually half of those customers are our policyholders. So the data size that we're dealing with on a daily basis are like hundreds of times more than the traditional financial institutions. So computing is very important for us, and technology is very important for us. Why that we have this insurtech arm with SoftBank? If you look at the portfolios of SoftBank, there are a lot of autonomous driving companies. There are a lot of chip companies, and then robotics companies. So they have a long vision that future is faster than everybody expected. And when that future comes, everything is connected through data. So there's not so much like pure innovation. So as a insurance company, they want like their portfolio companies to be prepared for that. So I'm very impressed that you list all the internet companies in this region who are entering into or already entered into banking, insurance, and payment, right? So I would say insurance industry is maybe 20 years or 30 years behind of blockchain, of AI, or quantum computing.
It's bad. I think the insurance is even further behind than banking. I agree.
Yeah. So, I mean, the intention we want to implement those new technologies into the real cases. But the first challenges normally we deal with is human, right? Everybody have their conflict of interest. They don't want to be very transparent with each other. They don't want their data be processed. Because fair enough to say that the technology will make the whole society or the industry fair or unfair. Fair means, you see today, every of your data is exposed to the insurance companies, banks, based on the good behaviors and bad behaviors. You will be priced accordingly.
Yep.
Right? But now everybody is enjoying maybe a similar financial services. Not necessarily that they will enjoy a higher price or a lower price, right? But leveraging new technologies will make, the categories or segmentations will be streamlined, right? The good price and bad price. So what we're dealing with is really consolidate and make a common ground of different interests of conflict, so that the technologies can deliver the true value. For example, Professor Lee mentioned about 5Gs, right? But you also have a slide that Zhong'an, our parent company in China, also have 9 IPs in blockchain. But if you look at it, all the cases that we have done, it is dominated by a central point. Either that central point is a very big institution, or the central point is a government. Otherwise, you cannot bring different ecosystem partners into the same stage and persuade them to use either blockchain or AI. Again, back to why I think that the insurance industry is far behind even banks to adopt the new technologies, or of course, far behind the quantum computing. I'll give you an example. So if we talk about the biggest internet companies in the world, the data size that they process normally are, I think, several hundred TB a day, right? As an insurance company, the data size we process is 15. So it's a tiny portion of it. But normally the traditional financial institutions, the data size they process is less than 1 TB every day, or sometimes 1 TB less than 1 TB a month. So they don't have that need to really adopt quantum computing or AI technologies, because they have far urgent pain points to solve. Right? So that is what we're pushing. So we think for the whole industry, in order to adopt advanced technology, we first need to focus on the infrastructure. The infrastructure can connect each other into the same chain, so that we can share and we can utilize most of the data. So we have a very standard data structure and a governance structure, and we can further adopt new technologies.
That's right. So in the book, we have a long chapter on Ping On and Ping On's entire rollout of all of its products, and we have a chapter on InsurTech as well. Okay, we have some great questions. My God. So are you ready for the bombardment? Okay, we're going to do rapid fire. All right? And the first one, which is hilarious and really clever. Okay, David, you ready? Will quantum computing do a 51% attack on Bitcoin and blockchain one day?
I think there's a possibility that will happen, but there's also the other side that people are looking at quantum resistance, algorithm. So it is both sides of the coin. So people are just doing research in those areas. So there is a transition period that people just worried about that if somebody has it, that nobody else know about it. And that's why Paul questioned to you. Then that's where they are concerned. But then the thing that is that there will always be other new cryptocurrency coins coming out, which is quantum resistance.
Yeah. So quantum resistance is going to, will it develop in sync with the quantum attacks, or
I think there's an advantage of open source. I mean, you have open source, then then it's always more resilient than you have something which is not available publicly.
Yeah.
So I would be more worried if the financial system is based on a closed source system.
Yeah.
So I would strongly recommend that if you are not into the open source arena, it's about time to worry about quantum computing.
Yeah. Okay. A good question here on TransferWise and Revolut. Watch Revolut N26 in Germany. Revolut's the largest online bank in the UK now. N26 is the largest online bank in Germany. Kabbage, the largest SME lender in America. Watch if they join Facebook Libra. If they do, then it's a slam dunk. Facebook will just have more momentum. But so far, it's surprising they have not joined, because some of these guys have got really big egos and they want to be a planet. And I'm sorry, but Revolut is not going to be a planet, so forget it. But some of these people want to hold out, and they want planetary valuations. They don't want moon real estate, they want planet real estate. And so this is going to be weird to watch these guys. Was Zhong'an approached to be part of Facebook Libra? Do you know? If you were, what would happen?
Okay, so maybe a uniqueness of China's environment in terms of adopting the new technologies, because if you really want to participate in the government led projects, then they normally prefer that you adopt or you develop your own prototype in-house.
Yeah.
Or that you're part of the,
Mothership.
in-house.
Yeah. Mothership. Yeah. Right.
So frankly speaking, we don't have a near-term plan to be part of it.
Right. So this is an example where people are going to have to pick. You're going to have to pick Mothership Washington or Mothership Beijing, and I think this is something that we're just going to have to get used to, and I think Singapore struggles with this, right?
I think blockchain technology actually empowers the small and the weak and the needy. So if you are, neutral, your friends, everybody, blockchain is perfect for you, because just like what you are saying, a lot of countries has got no software and they are not part of the financial system.
Yep.
Because they are not Basel III compliant, and a lot of international banks will not want to deal with it. And now Facebook saying, hey, I got a free software for you. Would you like to come on board, And suddenly a whole banking system have access to cheap capital. And that's what's been hindering you from leapfrogging the developing economy. So you would like to have access to cheap capital. So I won't be surprised that, there will be other countries that will want to join as a node, to be part of that. Yep. And the key thing that people need to think about is that in the consensus algorithm or in the major decision to be made in the association, you have the 2/3 majority.
Yep.
So the number 34 is a magic number if you have 100 members. So who are the 34 that will be able to have a veto power, either on-chain or off-chain? So those are the issues that I think Facebook had really thought about it. It's not something that it just came out with 100 and they come out with BFT, Libra BFT. They have thought through this very carefully.
Yeah. So it's like the Senate. the U.S. Senate in terms of passing an amendment. You've got to have, it's really hard to get.
We never know. Maybe there'll be government linked companies or government investment companies that form the other 34 nodes. Then it's back to the power base of the governments, except that now you have a modified form of trade agreement.
Yes.
Then blockchain is just a coded form of trade agreement in the virtual world.
Is that possible? I mean, so is it possible that there's a government entity among the 100?
Well, we shouldn't rule it out, because in the physical world, we always talk about trade agreement. Everybody is come to the table.
But no one's talking about that.
But blockchain is a coded governance and coded agreement, and smart contract is coded execution. So it's much cheaper to get untrusted party to say that I have devised this. Come and join me if you agree. If not, I'll do a Libra coin 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And there will be people who want to join. It's a lot more, cost-effective for agreement to be formed rather than the usual trade agreement. But in the virtual world, it's a form of trade agreement in the virtual world.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This is from Mirza, my intern, doing a great job. What are the factors that differentiate crypto coins other than being secure and allowing you to perhaps purchase more products? So I think that we just finished I just finished a piece on this. We just spent a long time, all day Saturday, polishing a piece on Facebook Libra, and I think it's fascinating. Facebook wants Libra and Calibra, the wallet, to be like the special drawing rights of the IMF, currency backed by dollars, pounds, yen, and euros. And so it's just like the capital structure of the IMF. That's really clever. And one of the things that's also really clever is when Libra is rolled out, the tokenization is going to be, for instance, eBay. You give us all of your used stuff, and we will inventory it and sell it online and give you tokens. And the tokens can be used in our ecosystem and our infrastructure. To me, the tokenization that Facebook wants to do is like government deficits. It just is sloshing around and contributes to growth without being a drag. Now, the thing that I'm so struck by, and you guys can pitch in, if Facebook said, you know what, you guys have been given a raw deal. We're going to give you 0.0001 cent for every piece of data that you give us. You would have this thing taking off like there's no tomorrow. Why? These guys are so dumb not to do that. Why don't they spend a little bit of money and say, you know what, we're going to pay you for your data? Is that happening? Are other people, Ubin? What's going on? Anyone talking about this?
I think at the end of the day, people have to realize that cryptocurrency or tokens is to incentivize people to participate.
Yeah.
So it's very important. You talk about blockchain, you have no tokens or reward system. It's hard to have social scalability. So you need to have social scalability. And if you really have a big base of user, you are starting at a very different level. And then that every time you post something that you have more than 100 likes, we'll reward you, and people will start posting. And
with Libra coin.
Yeah, Libra coin, or, and, the thing is still about privacy protection. Mm-hmm. I think people are just not comfortable with that. With Project Ubin, they have zero knowledge proof in one of the testnet that they have. So that is the difference. I think there will be some coins coming out to focus a lot more on privacy protection.
Yep.
And that is, I think, key to another group of people who actually want their privacy. When you have privacy protection, it doesn't mean that you cannot get rewarded, which allow people to use your data. You can do a query system, but you have no access to my raw data.
Yep.
And people are just worried that their raw data are being used by people that they don't know who they are.
Yeah.
So if you have a protection system, privacy protection, a lot of algorithms like multi-party computing, zero knowledge proof, secret sharing, and so on, they're all available. It's just that Facebook is just not using it.
Yep. Now over to you, Yvonne. Now, so in the chapter that we talked about with our partners in Washington D.C. for QBranch, which now is Rigetti, there is a difference in cracking codes, which modern computers can take up to 1,200 years to crack a code. Apparently, quantum computing, when it's ready, can do that in 24 hours. So there is an issue of speed. That was a question about speed. There is a question of speed where the government who gets that first is in a really good position, because that's your nuclear bomb. And you either build a lot of it or you sell it, right? Or you steal it. That's what's been going on with nuclear technology, right? And so that is true. That statement is true, correct?
Yeah, there exists an algorithm that allows us to factor large numbers. It's called the Shor's factoring algorithm, and it's actually in some sense really funny, because so far we don't know that many ways that quantum computers could speed things up, and just turns out we do know how to speed up factoring large numbers, and a lot of our encryption schemes depend on factorizing or not factorizing large numbers quickly. So yes, I think that's one area that actually drew the attention of a lot of the national security organizations, because there is a potential for the party that owns a quantum computer first to have more power in terms of encryption over the parties that do not own a quantum computer. But at the same time, there are other quantum devices like quantum communication and quantum key distribution tools that could change the way we encrypt our secrets and we communicate it to each other. So if you use quantum technology to protect against quantum technology, that's actually one way to not be afraid of this problem. So in some sense, the technology is both enabling and potentially a threat at the same time.
Yep. And now, so when you found out that this quantum communication satellite launched by China that caused this, I call it the strategic freakout in Washington, that's pretty big that you have something that's operating in space, that's a quantum communication satellite, that's effective for all of the Chinese embassies around the world and for all communications. Is that a big deal? Is that a really big deal?
Absolutely. I think it's a big deal on many levels. As a scientist, I think it's fantastic, because that's really a breakthrough in making this communication technology a lot more robust, so robust that you can put it on a rocket, launch it in a satellite, and it still functions well. It's also a big improvement in the distance that it could cover. So the first demonstration was a quantum-protected video conference call between the Chinese Academy of Science as well as the Vienna group, one of the biggest groups in quantum communication technologies.
Oh, right, fascinating.
So that was really cute. I think scientifically it's really impressive. And I guess it's also a big deal for national security and I don't know, competition for power and things like that.
Yep.
But I think, in general, at this point, it's done more good in terms of encouraging more research in this area. As scientists also, I think we're seeing more funding, so that's always good, even though that's a bit driven by fear, but it is not a bad thing that more people, at least attention grabbing in that sense, that more people are interested, more people are looking into it, and starting to realize that maybe getting quantum ready is a relevant thing, not just for big companies or big nations, but for everybody, for smaller states, especially when we don't have our own hardware. It's really important to make sure we have the talent and the expertise to be ready when it's necessary.
Yeah, so we were talking about this at lunchtime last week, and the Pentagon, just put $1 billion into the Pentagon budget in November, saying, spend this money now. Spend this $1 billion in the next 12 months on quantum computing. Get it done. And so this is independent of all the money that's been given to the NSA over, starting in 2000 and I think you said 2003 or 2004.
Early 2000s.
So the NSA has been at this since 2003, basically. So they have like a 15-year head start, and so I think we're going to assume that the U.S. government has a working model of something.
I think. Right now, it does look like most of the big players are, both academic and industrial ones, are located in the States. That's true. But as we know more about the technology, the barrier to entry is also lowering. So for Alibaba to build a team and get to the level where IBM is right now, maybe it will take them a lot shorter because now they've learned all the mistakes that people's made in the past decade, so they can accelerate their development and maybe get there a little bit faster.
Yeah,
so maybe the head start is not as big as we think.
Really, really fascinating. Okay, David, here's a question, which again is the heart of last night's grumpiness with some people in the audience in Hong Kong. Shifting trust from centrally insulated authorities, central banks, to entities like Facebook, which themselves have a very tarnished reputation, seems, and he said the word catch-22. How do you justify, giving Facebook all this power when they have a lot of cold sores, to be quite frank.
So that is a discussion point now. If you look at all the Chinese press these few days, Zhou Xiaochuan actually came out to give a talk talking precisely about this point about having some of the power being transferred to private enterprises. And if you want to do that, he encourages that that should be a direction to go because he feels that we should be agnostic to technology. We should be agnostic to what the structure is. That's what he said. But once we see that a financial system cannot solve the problem, then we should find technology that can solve the problem. That was his speech, and I was like taken aback that that's from him and from China. So it's just a point that people are just looking into it and see how this empowering of the organization and hopefully empowering of the individuals at the end of the day. Because whatever we do at the end of the day is about independent decisions. Whether you can go the AI way in some AI technology that you could allow people to have no independent decisions, or you can put a stop to that and say that there's ethical AI that we should pursue. So same with blockchain. People are looking at ethics on blockchain. I'm sure a lot of governments will be like what they've done for AI to come out and say, what is the ethics for blockchain? And from there, once you understand what are the transition issues and what are the possible failure, the market failure that can happen, then the regulators have to come to deal with. But the thing is that once you have decentralization and once you diminish oneself, it is just a piece of software that people can just download and start to run it. So it is very costly to regulate. It is very costly to actually control it. So at the end of the day, my own feeling is that you will end up controlling human behavior. And to control human behavior, then you will be controlling people. And controlling people, and you look at whether it's autonomous vehicles or blockchain or AI, at the end of the day, it's about licensing of the developers. That's what I'm seeing, right? Because you break down to, at the end of the day, it's just about licensing developers and what they can license, or what they can program and what they cannot program. Because after they program and put it up to open source, you don't know who they are. So it will come to a stage where we have to license and look at the developers and what they're writing and monitor them closely. It's just like licensing any stockbrokers or I can't think of anything else that you can deal with decentralization.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. So last year at the Deutsche Bank annual conference, a guy gets up there and the whole board of directors there, and he says, is there any scandal or illegal activity case anywhere in the world that Deutsche Bank is not involved in? Can you board of directors give us an example? And everybody, it was extremely embarrassing, but that was like the state of banking. Right, and so there was a survey I saw last year that was people would rather, one of the things, would you rather go to the dentist or go to a bank? And they said, I'd rather go to the dentist. And so you have appalling service combined with runaway, out of control, illegal activity in money laundering, fraud, corruption, on and on with all the banks all over the world. And so I was with one of the leaders of CIC, the Sovereign Wealth Fund, and he said something to me like 5 years ago, and he said, you know what, we can't screw it up any more than Wall Street screwed it up, so we may as well have our own system. And I think that's kind of where we are at the moment, where yes, we are, Facebook does have a tawdry reputation, and it's fishnet stockings are torn, and it's, high heels are broken, but hey, look at how the banks nearly destroyed the world 10 years ago. You know, and this is a hard one. You know, this is a tough one. So anyway, we have a couple of really good questions left. Can we use AI to unlock the problems we face with quantum algorithms? Yvonne, does that question ring a bell to you? Does it? Can you untangle it a little bit?
That's really funny, actually. I usually hear it the other way around. Can we use quantum computing to solve AI problems?
Right.
But I guess, yeah, in some sense, there's a little bit of going hand in hand. A quantum computer could have more power to deal with larger data sets and finding complex patterns in really messy data. So in some sense, that could help implementing AI algorithms or AI tasks. But at the same time, maybe I could also foresee there would be certain AI algorithms that could learn to maybe solve a problem that would help advance quantum computing. So So the one thing I really want to emphasize with quantum computing is that for every task we want to do, or every improvement, either in terms of speed or power, on a quantum machine, we need to have the appropriate algorithm to run it through, right? So in some sense, we're building a hardware, but we also need to develop these algorithms. And those algorithms could be based on AI protocols or regular machine learning protocols, or it could be completely new. So we don't have that, you know, there's a zoo of quantum algorithms that you can look up. They're in the orders of maybe hundreds, so there are not that many compared to classical algorithms that we know. So in some sense, you know, there's a big unknown space that's very exciting. Maybe we can see, you know, some hybrid quantum AI algorithms coming to life with more people putting their expertise and intelligence into this. But at the moment, I think it's possible, but I don't think we know for sure.
Yeah. Okay, Young, we have a question from the audience on, a couple of people in the audience are concerned insurance agents. What do you advise people in the front office of insurance companies to be cracking on in the anticipation of the online tsunami that's coming toward us? What should these people do?
Okay, I mean, fair enough. We have a negative slogan for the whole insurance industry, which is convince you or confuse you. So convince you or confuse you. Eventually, the sole purpose will be sell policy to you, right? I think for the insurance industry, of course, we're using technologies to improve the efficiency and accuracy of the agents, so that we will make sure that the best agents will sell and serve the customers in the most proper way.
Yes.
So that not every agent will just like dating in the market and find anyone to do a hard sell, right? And in the long run, I think the technology with the chatbot will not replace agent for all, right? We're talking about that these two models will coexist, because there are still some of the complicated insurance products. It's like structured rates or structured products for the investment bankings cannot be sold or explained by machines according to the different education level of the customers. But we are seeing a shift from like face-to-face and people-to-people sales to online chatbot helped sales. So that is a trend is very clear, but the portion of it is still very small. If we look at the overall industry globally, I think the online service and sale of the insurance is still less than 5%. But that number is doubling in the past.
Changing really fast.
Yeah, it's doubling. I think the market share is doubling every year for the past 5 years.
But see, I had even a year ago, I had the head of a big insurance company in the US saying, you'll never sell life insurance online, forget it. And it's just happening so fast now. So online life insurance is being sold in large numbers. Right, and so I think that people are kidding themselves if they think that you're going to be relying on agents to sell even life insurance, which is, well, of course, our company's 90 years old. It takes a long time to develop this, kind of trust, and people aren't just going to buy anything online. Well, yes, they will, as it turns out.
Yeah, I would say, the insurance services or banking services offered by internet companies actually will bring totally different experience to the customers. There are commitments from those internet companies which involve a lot of like business insight and ways that think from a customer-centric view. For example, I think before, like in China, Alibaba or Tencent, they enter into the wealth management or banking services. If you want to, buy the fund from money market, if you want to trade it in the money market, the quickest way to do it is, liquidity is T+1.
Yeah.
Right, you need to wait. But what those internet companies can do is holding those very big customer bases as well as cash flows that it can offset. You will only do the liquidity to the net out amounts to the customers, to the targeted customers. So the liquidity is like seconds rather than T+1.
Yeah.
That is totally a different experience.
Yeah. Sorry, I lost my luggage this morning from Singapore Airlines, and so I'm trying to locate my luggage. So just a little emergency there, so I apologize. Now, quantum computing and investment and trading. UBS is doing a lot of work in the area of quantum computing software and trading. So they're doing a lot of their algorithmic trading is being based on quantum software now. So they are in the lead in the world on a lot of this stuff. I think also JP Morgan is doing some work on this. I think a few of the other banks are getting on this, but it's still very primitive. And there's only a handful of banks that are really using quantum software to begin to implement this in trading. So this is happening in front of our eyes, and I believe from my investment in Washington, UBS has been using this for, I think, 3 years now. So they're quite a bit, they're quite a ways onto this. Now, let's think of a world where Singapore has 5 virtual banking licenses, and now here's March 2020, and Facebook Libra Coin is now available. What are these virtual banks going to do with Libra Coin? Are they just going to be like deer in the headlights? What are they going to? They're just going to stare at this.
I think the key thing is about crossing borders.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the advantages of decentralization is that you can cross borders, which if you are not decentralized is a lot harder. So if you are trying to lower the cost, like you say, the remittance costs, the cost and so on, I think that problem World Bank has been trying to solve for many years, and they missed the target time after time.
Totally. Yeah.
Totally. Every time below 6%, they never reach the target. Below 3%, they never reach the target.
Yes.
But the banking system still have a role to play, which is, I think, you need to have new business model, which I mentioned earlier on about, how about lending out smaller amount in shorter time period with lower cost? Because by fragmenting the lending period, by fragmenting the lending to a specific purpose, you actually lower risk, and therefore it's beneficial to the borrowers. And what is lacking in the whole ASEAN is about borrowing at a decent rate. And I think in some of the things that we have written, the borrowing cost could be about 400%, right?
Yeah.
So you just have to lower to about 20%, 10%, the loan sharks are gone. So these countries will grow, they're all growing well in this region. It's just that they don't have enough capital. But you need to find a way to ensure that your credit rating is is technology based, which I think Zhong'an and the Chinese companies are doing very well. Smaller amounts, shorter duration, lower rates. And this is what the digital bank could do, and working with cross-border, then the whole of ASEAN is going to continue to grow for a long time to come.
Yeah, so it's basically dealing with rip-off artists in the loan sharks or rip-off artists in the commission fee. Come on, when I transfer money from DBS to HSBC in Hong Kong, it's $40. This is crazy. $40 to transfer money to Hong Kong. That's ridiculous. Another question comes up here again. We gave a lot of examples in the chapter on quantum computing that there was probably 16 different industries where we could have revolutionary changes. I think the most important, from my recollection, in that is meteorology is extremely important. Our capacity for monitoring more than 7 storm systems at any one time on Earth is very limited. So there's one, right? The issue of I think degenerative brain disease is extremely important. And then I think the other one is nitrogenase. Cracking nitrogen is extremely energy intensive, and that's the foundation for all fertilizer. What if we could eliminate that? That's 5% of the global supply of energy is used to create fertilizers. And there's many other examples in there. So we have a lot. Here's a question on Libra on the transaction costs. I think that if you have a system where according to what Facebook is saying, that Libra will be a SDR-based system where it's going to be a weighted average of dollars, yen, pounds, and euros, you should have a fairly stable, regime, a fairly stable FX regime that's not going to be all over the place like Bitcoin is. The question is, Calibra is the wallet. Will the commission structures be contained inside Calibra? We don't know, but the answer is probably yes.
Yeah, I think it's just the transaction cost will actually, the transaction fees always go to the nodes who actually do the verification. So whether they are, whether they are rotating or whatever, then they will still get the transaction fees. But the transaction fees are going to
Collapse.
It's going to collapse, but so there are two sources of income from here. One is from the underlying instruments that have interest payment. So that will be going to the investment coin of the 100 nodes, and then the transaction fees possibly will go to also the 100 nodes, unless you have your own app going on top, and then you have your own way of charging it. So I can only see the income gearing towards the 100 nodes that has put down 10 million as a membership fee.
Okay, we're going to wrap up. We're going to give 1 minute lightning round here. Yang, we're going to start with you. What is what is your most important initiative for protecting data privacy for health online?
I think what we are focused right now is building up the infrastructure to connect with all the stakeholders related to the health. Because what we want to do is to, whenever customer needs it, then the whole data chain will flow into all the related parties in a very short manner. The first initiative that we do is we have a lot of doctors from the hospitals with health background to sit down with each of the hospitals that we connect and to try to standardize the data that they keep in their database. And based on the market standards like ICD-10. So that is really the hard work that we have done for the past several years. I think in China there are several entities that are doing that, and Ping An is one of them, and we are one of them as well. So it really showed a huge commitment from the commercial institutions how to reconstruct the whole value chain.
Fascinating. Okay, Yvonne, when are we going to see a working quantum computer? And with plus or minus 6 months.
6 months. Probably in a few decades.
What?
But I think the more important message is that getting ready for that takes probably just as long, if not longer. So we should all start getting ready now.
Rigetti is not talking like that, so...
Well, Rigetti is about to raise another round of funding, so... and I'm an independent researcher, so you should decide who to trust.
Oh my God. Okay, David, so Facebook Libra, I mean, is this going to be like a dystopian nightmare, or like a dream come true for 1 billion people who never had a bank account who can get access to cheap money and zero-cost FX, transfers?
Well, technology can always do good and do harm. So it's very important, I think, for most governments to really get in tune with technology and come together and understand what this is all about, which are really happening. I think a lot of people, maybe last year, they could be renowned economists and so on, they just brush off cryptocurrency and say that it's just scam, And then you have a lot of people who actually, who are investors and say that, there's no value in cryptocurrency. And then suddenly they all realize that it is a lot more than that. It is not a technology alone. Technology is just a small part of what we're looking at in the token economy.
Yeah,
It's an entire social change driven by technology. I think that
indeed.
people don't really see, and they use the old economy yardstick to value all these companies, and what harm that come along with it. You have to see the value, then you can see what cost you need to impose on them.
Yeah,
but if you don't understand the value of it, you will never know how much cost you need to impose on people.
Yeah.
Or look at the blockchain way how you can incentivize them to go towards the right direction.
Yep.
I think that's very key to it.
Yeah, and then last question. Your ear is close to the ground with the government. Do you think the government is like, Facebook Libra is interesting, or no way in hell?
I wouldn't say that I'm very close, but then I read signals. I think all governments are actually sitting up to look at it, because it's the ultimate of game theory. You participate, you have a lot to gain. If you do not participate, you could lose your monetary policy because the velocity within your country could just diminish.
Yes.
And then it has implication for fiscal policy as well, because you are not on a network, then how are you going to collect your income tax? So it has got major implication for monetary and fiscal policy that you take part.
Everything.
You take part, then you benefit, and you don't take part, then everything could be gone. So you got to make a decision now.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Everybody, enjoy the book, and thank our audience, our grouper, and wonderful audience. Thank you so much. Yeah. That's a great point. Yeah. That was great. Thank you so much. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that's great. Fantastic.
Thank you, Bruce.